Hey YouTube friends, welcome to 2018. Ben here, and today's topic, let's talk about Powerheads. Some people use them, some people don't, some people love them, some people think they're just ugly clutter. Give me your thoughts on them below. I certainly would like to hear about it, but here's my 2 cents on the subject of using Powerheads in an aquarium. Thank you so much for tuning in. Well, let's first start off with a distinction between wave makers and power heads. I've used them interchangeably myself, but a wave maker is something that creates more of a broad stream of water, essentially creating waves in the tank, where a power head, by contrast, is creating more of a directed or focused stream of water, like the ones I have in my tank. These are actually what you would call power heads. In my case, I use power heads for 2 purposes. One is to suspend waste and detritus so that it can be absorbed by the filter intakes, and that's what these lower power heads are doing. And you can have those on a timer so that they're not constantly pushing your fish around. So maybe 6 hours a day of that. Sort of a lazy man's way of vacuuming. It's not a substitute for vacuuming, but it doesn't substitute stirring around the sand to release gases and things of that nature. But as you can see, it keeps the substrate relatively clean. This tank hasn't been vacuumed in over a week. And the power heads that are at the top, those power heads are there to create surface tension breakup so that carbon dioxide can escape the tank and oxygen can get in. And as you can see in my tank, there is a lot of surface tension breakup, a lot of surface agitation being created by that dual head 1600 gallon per hour power head. So in the case of this tank, I very much like the use of power heads, though aesthetically they might not be the most beautiful thing, but I use them. And this is different than in my 100-gallon acrylic, where the only use of the power head there is to move detritus. In this tank, the purpose of the power head, which is connected to the outside right wall of the tank, is to move detritus across the tank and into the filter intake, which is located on the left side of the tank. And its purpose is to keep the substrate clean, which you can see here. The substrate has not been vacuumed in several days, and yet it looks very, very clean. The outputs of the Fluval FX6 are creating enough surface agitation for oxygen, so oxygen is not the worry in this tank. Plus I have an algae scrubber, which is creating some surface breakup. In the 60-gallon grow-out tank, there are no power heads because the outputs of the Sun canisters are actually creating enough surface tension breakup. And I also have an Emperor or Marineland 400 biowheel, which creates a lot of surface tension breakup. So I'm getting plenty oxygen in this tank with filtration, so I don't really need a power head. So with these 2 tanks, I'm not using power heads the way I am in the 135. In these tanks, in this one there's no power head, simply not needed. And in this one over here, the power head has the purpose of creating water circulation to move detritus in the direction of the filter intake, which happens to be on this side of the tank. That, of course, is very different from what I'm doing with this tank, where I have power heads providing vacuuming of the substrate, like in the 100 acrylic, but also creating a lot of surface tension breakup for oxygen purposes, because of course I have much larger fish here, much greater oxygen needs in a much more heavier stock tank. And you'll notice that even though they are worked up, thinking they're going to get fed, you don't see a lot of that working their mouths. You don't see that gasping that you see. And if you ever see your fish working their mouths repeatedly in a non-stop fashion, or hanging around the top of the tank, chances are that your tank is low in oxygen and it needs more oxygen exchange. Now that can be accomplished with the use of power heads, breaking up the surface, or you can point your outputs, like I have here, the two Sun 704B outputs in the back. You can point your outputs so that they're breaking up the surface, or you can have a bubbler. A bubbler can do that as well. Another reason I like power heads is because they do move water from the bottom of the tank, which is less oxygen rich. That water is moved up to the top where it can exchange and become more oxygen rich. So the saturation of oxygen is throughout the tank. You don't have any areas of the tank that are at all lacking oxygen. So, and if you watch my videos, you know that there was an incident that occurred, probably a year or more ago, where I had an oxygen incident that cost me some fish. And maybe to some degree I overcompensate now because of that. Maybe it left me a little scarred. At any rate, I certainly use power heads and encourage their use, especially in a longer 6-foot tank like this one. But I do have other tanks where I use other methods, or where I rely exclusively on the water movement and agitation being created by filtration. So that's my 2 cents on power heads. I hope you find it useful. Well, there you have it. That's my 2 cents on power heads. Probably a little more like 25 cents. And be sure to put your comments below. If you would like to subscribe, please hit the button that's going to be appearing over here on the video. And visit my friend over at Hap Nation, Evan Alexander. Be sure to visit his YouTube channel. And I want to thank you for tuning in. Let's all have a great 2018 with a lot of success with our fish. All right? Thank you so much. Bye-bye.